By the time I sat under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the state licensing board, wearing a suit that smelled faintly like coffee and panic, I already knew the script by heart. The woman with the stenography machine asked me to state my name, and I did, then added, because I'd practiced this line into the bathroom mirror, "My wife slept with our therapist and called it healing." Somewhere behind me, a pen scratched faster. A panelist with a neat bob and a face that did not move asked me to begin at the beginning, which was a trick question because the beginning of betrayal is never in the place you think it is. It's not the parking lot where you notice the extra car. It's not the text thread with the too many ha-ha-ha's. It's not even the first time she says, "I just need space." The beginning, in my case, was our Costco run 2 summers ago. We split a rotisserie chicken and a 30-pack of sparkling water, and I suggested we see someone, professionally. "I don't want to become one of those couples who argues about toothpaste caps," I said. She laughed and said we were already those couples, plural, and it was a good laugh, the kind where you remember why you chose this person to be your family, the kind that makes you forget the late-night glow of her phone. Our therapist's website had an ocean banner and a font that looked like it could pat you on the back. Attachment repair and somatic integration, it promised, plus a free 15-minute consultation if you subscribed to the newsletter. He was called Dr. Adler, technically a PsyD, but the name tag on his cardigan said Dr. A, like he was the cool teacher who let you eat gum. The first session smelled like peppermint tea and eucalyptus oil. I told him the truth straight, something that felt American in its earnestness. I love my wife, and lately it feels like I live with a roommate who pays rent in size. He nodded with the kind of neutral warmth that makes you want to confess to things you haven't done yet. My wife, Lily, talked about pressure, about expectations, about the way I turned every dinner into a project plan. I took notes in a leather journal because I'd heard on a podcast that men who wrote things down were 47% less likely to blow up over nothing. Dr. A called me a highly structured partner, and Lily a free associative self, which I took as a compliment until I realized free associative was another way of saying she could say anything and the table would nod. We left that first hour lighter, and on the way home we stopped for soft serve. I thought we were on a path. The path is always part of the marketing. Over the next few months, we did the work. Date nights where we talked about everything but the thing. "I feel" statements that I delivered like lines in a play, hushed and careful. We learned how to mirror. "What I hear you saying is that when I start cleaning the kitchen while you're still eating, it feels like I'm cleaning you away." I learned to keep my mouth closed and my eyes open. The nights got weirdly quiet, the way a house goes quiet before a storm. She began adding extra sessions with Dr. A, solo time to process, she said, on Thursdays at 7 p.m. I told myself this was good, that giving someone space was the opposite of control, that jealousy was a caveman emotion, and I was not a caveman. I drove a hybrid and composted and knew the difference between a Pinot and a cab. One night she came home glowing. Not the kind of glow you get from a skincare routine. This was a backlit glow, the kind that makes a person look like they've swallowed a secret and it's giving off heat. "I think I had a breakthrough," she said. Dr. A did a somatic exercise, and I felt held. She let the word hang there, delicious and vague. I told her I was happy for her, and I said it like I meant it, because at that point, I still believed we were fixing us. Later, at 11:37 p.m., I scrolled through our joint credit card statement and saw a charge from his office labeled Extended Session. I scrolled again and found 3 more, neatly spaced, just like her alibis. That's the thing about betrayal. It wears a Fitbit. It logs its steps. I didn't confront her because confronting her would make me the bad cop in a movie where she's the protagonist, and I'd decided I was the guy who believed in us, in therapy, in American reinvention. I told myself that anybody who said cheating wife out loud about his own spouse had already decided the ending, and I wanted a different ending. I even bought a copy of Hold Me Tight and underlined the parts about attachment injuries like I was studying for a midterm. When the licensing board asked me about the turning point, I told them it wasn't the parking lot, or the text, or the receipt. It was a Sunday at church in the courtyard, paper cups of coffee and the men's group arguing the quarterback situation, and one of the wives, who had a knack for slicing social fabric, took my elbow and said, "I'm so glad you two are doing the radical honesty work. It's brave." I didn't know we were doing radical honesty, but apparently Lily was in a book club with the therapist's girlfriend, and isn't it funny how small the world is when you don't want it to be? On the drive home, I asked Lily what radical honesty was, and she said, "It's a practice where you stop pretending." I had the distinct feeling I was the only one still pretending. There's a version of me, call him past me, or beta me, that never drives back to the office that night. He sits on the couch, watches the game, trusts the process, and believes that healing is a neutral noun. That version has a long, slow ache, the kind you medicate with podcasts and jogging. The man who actually exists, the me who listened to the voice inside that sounded like my late grandfather at the hardware store saying, "Son, something's off," puts on sneakers and leaves the house. I don't tell Lily. I say I need milk at 8:41 p.m., which is true, we are out. The therapist's office is in a strip mall between a Pilates studio and a dog bakery. At night, the sign for attachment repair and somatic integration hums like a distant spaceship. The parking lot's half empty, but her car is there, the little chip in the rear bumper winking like it knows. The blinds are mostly drawn, but there's a sliver where you can see enough to rewrite a life. I remember the exact angle of the lamp on the end table, the tidy row of tissue boxes that suddenly feel like props in a satire, the way Dr. A's cardigan was folded on a chair like a flag after a burial. My wife's laugh drifted through the wall. It wasn't one of her laughs from home. The polite laugh, the tired laugh, the laugh you use to keep the peace. This was a laugh I'd never heard, brand new and already old. I didn't kick the door. I'm not that guy. I knocked, like a man asking to be let into his own story. After a minute, the lock flicked. Dr. A opened the door with the palms-up shrug of a guy who'd been caught with a theory. Behind him, Lily was red-cheeked and serene, like she'd just completed a marathon called Feelings. "We were in the middle of a very intense somatic release," he said, and I swear to you he arranged the words on the air like coasters. "No," I said, because vocabulary shouldn't be a hall pass. "You were in the middle of infidelity." He gave me the soft eyes, the ones therapists deploy when a client is about to bolt. "Labeling is defensive," he said. "This is a container we created together to process intimacy wounds." Lily tucked hair behind her ear, a gesture I used to think was meant for me. "It's not cheating," she said, and I felt the universe tilt on its axis. "It's an intervention. We're repatterning my nervous system around safe touch." There's a gritty American comedy in moments like these, where the absurdity is almost tender. I looked at the tissue boxes and pictured a board meeting where they debated whether aloe-infused would be more trauma-informed. I told them I didn't consent to this container, Dr. A said the container had its own consent, which is a thing people say when they've decided words mean whatever saves them. I could feel revenge heating in my chest, not the cinematic kind with sirens and bat-wielding cousins, more the bureaucratic variety, forms and complaints and Yelp. I asked him, with a steadiness that surprised me, if therapeutic touch included closing the blinds and removing cardigans. He didn't blink. "In some modalities," he said, "clothing can interfere with somatic attunement." Later, when I replayed the scene for the board, someone actually coughed a laugh into a sleeve. In the moment, I stood there and felt the tectonic plates of family shift. Lily was still talking, gently and earnestly, the way Americans are trained to speak once they've read 2 books about boundaries. "This isn't betrayal," she said. "It's a repair." My body needed to feel what safety feels like. I asked why safety didn't involve me. She said because I had become the trigger. She said trigger like a verdict. Dr. A, magnanimous, suggested we all sit and breathe together. I told him I'd breathe outside, where the air didn't smell like eucalyptus and lies. On the walkway, I dialed our insurance. It was after hours, and a recorded voice thanked me for trusting Maple Rock Health and reminded me that if this was an emergency, I should hang up and dial 911. Betrayal, it turns out, doesn't qualify as an emergency in the actuarial tables. I paced by the dog bakery while a teenager in a visor filled a cupcake with peanut butter frosting. I remembered the first time Lily and I slow danced, how she whispered the lyric about a family like a prayer. I thought about the word cheating wife, so blunt it felt medieval, and how she would argue it was a label that kept me small. The self-help books never tell you what to do when healing becomes the mask for cheating. Out of some masochistic instinct to close the loop, I went back in. We did not sit. Dr. A proposed a radical honesty container, and I said I was radically honest when I said I was done. Lily's eyes flickered, and for a second I saw the sorrow under the doctrine. "I'm not trying to hurt you," she said. "I'm trying to find me." I wanted to say finding you cost us me, but the sentence knotted in my throat. Instead, I took pictures. Not of bodies, just the office, the clock, the sign on the wall about ethics with a quote that landed like satire, the clipboard with Attachment Arbitration Protocol 7, half written in loopy handwriting. I didn't know yet that this would become a conspiracy thread, how many people were running this protocol, how many couples were breaking on its altar. At the car, my hands shook. I put the milk in the trunk like a man keeping his promises. I drove home with the radio off and the future roaring louder than any station. In America, we outsource our feelings to systems, church, law, coaching, 12-step, hashtags, and if the systems fail, we hire new systems. By Monday morning, the systems all knew. The group text we share with neighbors blew up with coded emojis and careful language. At the barbecue the following weekend, the men clapped my shoulder like they were testing a stud in drywall, and the women tilted their heads the way they do when they've already decided the moral of the story. One woman told me she'd heard, "Somatic work can be intense." Another woman said, "Bless your heart," which is a Southern verdict dressed as concern. I didn't go nuclear. I went practical. I found a lawyer whose office had 0 eucalyptus. Pam King wore navy and carried a pen like a dagger. She used words like fiduciary and misconduct, and my nervous system found that soothing. She said, "We're not going to let them turn your family into a case study." And the word family caught in my chest like a splinter I both hated and wanted to keep. We gathered evidence. I subpoenaed billing records. I learned that our therapist offered extended attunement intensives, which on paper sounded like incense and soft music and in practice apparently included blind-drawn rooms and the kind of intimacy you don't put in brochures. Lily moved into her sister's for space. I took the dog, who kept nosing the door at 6:58 p.m., like he knew when therapy started. Nights stretched long. I tried the dive bar down by the freeway where the bartender remembered orders and grudges. A guy in a faded ball cap told me his ex-wife had found clarity with a yoga teacher named Jet, and we clinked glasses like people who've seen the same weather. There were moments I felt the ridiculousness of it all and laughed, which scared me, because laughter is how you let go. Then there were hours when I drafted blistering monologues, the kind you deliver in a courtroom that smells like lemons, where the judge bangs a gavel and declares cheating wife into the record. When the calls from my mother came, they were laden with the kind of Midwest theology that makes everything a lesson. "People make mistakes," she said. "Family endures." I said the word infidelity, and it dripped like oil. She sighed and told me to eat something. Pam connected me with a PI who wore an untucked polo and drove a Camry like it was a stakeout van. He found the girlfriend Dr. A had mentioned exactly once. The girlfriend had a podcast, of course she did, about relational awakenings, and in episode 38 she interviewed Dr. A about ethical edges in somatic practice. They spoke in a language that felt like English arranged in new, unhelpful ways. He said the body doesn't lie. I wanted to mail him a diagram of adrenaline. The conspiracy part snuck up on me, not the lizard people kind. The slower, subtler kind where you realize a dozen therapists in a tri-county area were selling the same radical honesty weekend that involved blindfolds and consent flow charts, And, if you squinted at the fine print, a loophole big enough to drive a Tesla through. A guy at the bar told me his sister's husband had lost his marriage at the same retreat center by the lake with the Tibetan bowls. The HOA Facebook group exploded when someone posted a screenshot of Dr. A's flyer, and someone else recognized the fireplace in the photo as the Airbnb on Maple Glen that doesn't allow parties. Every thread ends with a miniature America. The moralists, the pragmatists, the performatively enlightened, the silent scrollers. The Nextdoor app, with its usual chorus of lost cats and suspicious vans, now hosted a debate about whether repatterning counted as cheating if both parties had breathwork. I stayed mostly quiet, which was my revenge. Silence is a kind of power when everyone expects a performance. Meanwhile, Lily messaged me in paragraphs that read like grant proposals. "I feel shame and freedom," she wrote. "I don't want to be your enemy." I wrote back, "I don't want enemies either," which was true, though at 2 a.m. my phone glowed with searches like how to file an ethics complaint and therapist boundaries, infidelity and what to do when healing becomes harm. The kids, none of our own but the ones across the street who rode scooters in our driveway, kept asking where Mrs. L was. I told them she was visiting her sister, and they shrugged and asked if I could lower the hoop. I lowered the hoop. You do what you can. Somewhere in the middle of that month, I realized I didn't want the Hollywood revenge. I didn't want to slash tires or torch reputations. I wanted something more boring and more absolute, my life back. I wanted the quiet that comes when you no longer need to monitor someone else's oxygen. So I cooked for one, badly but earnestly. I took the dog for longer walks and let him choose the route. I learned which aisles at Trader Joe's are truly dangerous. I went to a different therapist, a woman twice Dr. A's age who had 0 candles and one plant that looked like it had survived 3 wars. When I told her the phrase, "It's not cheating, it's healing," she didn't flinch or argue modality. She said, "Sometimes people use pretty words to make ugly choices." I cried like a teenager and felt something unclench. The ethics complaint Pam filed started moving through the system like a determined turtle. Depositions were scheduled. Dr. A's lawyer wore a tie the color of a bruise and used sentences with the word context. Through it all, I kept journaling, which felt both corny and essential. I wrote the words revenge and betrayal and toxic love and family and infidelity, not as hashtags but as weather reports. The page never argued back. The hearing took place in a windowless room that looked exactly like a place where truth would go to do paperwork. I sat at the end of a table with a carafe of water and a paper name tent that declared my existence in 12-point Times New Roman. I sat across, not in a cardigan now but in a suit, the uniform you wear when you want the state to believe you wouldn't do anything as pedestrian as cheating. Lily chose a seat at the back. She wore a sweater I'd once bought her on a November trip to Maine, and for a reckless second I wanted to ask if she still liked the oysters at Jay's. The board members asked questions with the polite ferocity of people who grade on curves. Did Dr. A disclose dual relationships? Did he obtain informed consent for physical touch? Had the client, the wife, experienced prior trauma that could complicate consent? Dr. A spoke in smooth, well-hydrated paragraphs. He cited research, or the idea of research. He said his work existed at the leading edge of somatic practice. Pam leaned forward and asked him to define the edge, and for the first time he looked like a man searching for his car keys. Then came the document. Remember the clipboard with Attachment Arbitration Protocol 7? It turned out Protocol 7 was not just a flourish of loops. It was a template, carbon copied across multiple clients, with sections about therapeutic containment of erotic transference. It contained a clause about time-limited touch that would have made a stoic blush. One of the board members read a line aloud and frowned so hard her bob moved. Suddenly the room shifted, the way a jury shifts when the plot point arrives. The official language for what happened next is summary suspension pending investigation, which is bureaucracy for, "We think you broke the thing you were paid to fix." Lily's breath hitched, and she stared at the table. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the hollow you get after revenge plays out and the credits roll, but you still have to go home and take out the trash. Outside in the bland sunshine, she caught up to me. "I never wanted this," she said. Not the hearing, not the headlines, not the word cheating wife stamped across my name like a barcode. She was crying, which still rearranged the furniture in my chest. "I wanted to feel alive," she said. "I thought if someone finally touched me without keeping score, I could be a person again." I told her the hardest thing I'd learned. There's a kind of touch that keeps score even when it swears it doesn't. We stood like that, two Americans on a sidewalk, the national anthem of leaf blowers buzzing from somewhere, and decided, without ceremony, that we would finish dissolving what we had without destroying what we were. Divorce is a strange administrative miracle. It takes a love story and flattens it into forms. We signed things, we divided objects. I got the dog and the cast iron skillet. She got the Vitamix and the good mixing bowls because she baked when she was happy, and it seemed optimistic to believe she would be happy again. Our friends picked sides or picked silence. The church ladies delivered a casserole and a glance. The neighbors returned to their regularly scheduled programming with brief commercial breaks for speculation. Pam sent me a bottle of something expensive with a card that said, "Here's to ordinary joys." In the parody version of my life, the version where I narrate everything like a deadpan podcast, I'm the guy who launches a docuseries called Therapy, but make it accountability. I interview experts with mugs that say, "Best Dad," and ask them if healing is a loophole for infidelity. I make charts. I sell tote bags. In the conspiracy version, Protocol 7 turns out to be the front line of an entire shadow network of practitioners selling intimacy recalibration to lonely people who want to be forgiven in advance. In the fantasy version, I grow wings made of red flags and fly away. In the real version, I take the dog to the lake and throw a tennis ball until he drags back happy and mud-proud, and I count that as a win. Some nights I still hear Dr. A's silk-smooth voice in my head offering to breathe together, and I laugh, and it's a real laugh now, the kind that belongs only to me. It's the kind that knows revenge looks good on Netflix, but peace feels better in a living room with unflattering lamps. I tell the story sometimes. I tell it at a men's group full of guys who smell like charcoal and loss, and I tell it to my mother over Sunday calls, and I tell it to a stranger on a plane whose earbuds die right as I say the words, toxic love. I don't say cheating wife like a curse anymore. I say it like a weather report that passed. I keep the words betrayal and family together in sentences that make room for new meanings. One afternoon in early fall, Lily texted me a photo of a loaf she'd baked, the kind with a flourish of flour on top that looks like a fern. "I'm sober from the stories I used to tell myself," she wrote. "It's not your job to believe me." I stared at that for a long time. Then I sent back a photo of the dog asleep on the rug, a goofy sprawl of a mammal who trusts the floor. "We're okay," I typed, and I meant it in the small way that matters. There's a TED Talk somewhere about how American reinvention is really about memory, about what you decide to keep and what you let float downstream. I kept enough. The state kept its suspension active. The podcast girlfriend deleted episode 38. The flyer disappeared from the Airbnb listing. In the evenings, I sit on the porch with a book and the sky, and the neighbors walk by with strollers and optimism, and I think about containers, the old kind, the new kind, the one we say is our heart, and I realize the only container I trust is the one I own, the spine that keeps me upright, the breath that doesn't need anyone else's permission, the ordinary rhythm of a life that wasn't destroyed so much as remade around a truth I finally stopped arguing with. Healing didn't destroy us. What destroyed us was calling cheating healing and expecting the word to do the work. What saved me was finally letting the words mean what they mean and doing the work myself.